Okay, so let's try to unpack this. We have some truly unsettling material for our deep dive today. We're focusing on an experiment that, on the surface, it looked like a utopian dream, a place where all the struggles of life were just engineered out of existence,
Right.
but which in the end devolved into this complete catastrophic societal breakdown.
And the really disturbing part, I think, for us is the paradox at the heart of it all.
Mm.
This collapse wasn't started by, some external failure like a famine or a disease. It was caused entirely by success.
Overwhelming success.
Yeah, overwhelming, radical, persistent success. An abundance so complete that it actually became toxic.
Exactly. Our topic today is Dr. John B. Calhoun's infamous project, Universe 25.
The mouse utopia.
Mouse utopia, yes.
Yeah.
A literal paradise built for mice in the late 1960s that, through this relentless scientific process, it turned into a tomb.
And it's a story that gets talked about a lot, but I don't think it gets analyzed with the depth it really deserves.
I agree, especially now, given how much more relevant its findings feel in our, highly optimized modern world.
Absolutely. Our sources for this dive really deep into the specific chronological collapse of this small world. And I think it's crucial that we analyze the specific psychological pathologies Calhoun documented.
Right.
And the chilling parallels he himself later drew to human society.
Things like the loss of social roles,
Yeah.
the toxicity of just being too close to too many others.
And the ultimate expiration of purpose.
So I guess that's our mission today. We need to distill the terrifying findings of the mouse utopia. We want to understand the mechanism by which comfort became the killer and really analyze the psychological and social warnings it offers for our own modern, increasingly abundant and frankly complex civilization.
And it's so important for you listening to grasp that the stakes here are profound. This research suggests that the essential ingredients for survival go far beyond just basic biology.
Right, it's not just about food and water.
Not at all. They require meaningful purpose, they require necessary challenge, and they require a functioning, stable social structure.
And when those psychological and sociological foundations are removed,
Even with perfect physical conditions, biology it stops caring. It gives up.
so let's start with the man himself, the scientist, and the radical question he was posing.
John B. Calhoun.
Right. It's the summer of 1968, and John B. Calhoun, he's an ethologist working at the National Institute of Mental Health in Maryland. He'd been conducting a series of studies on population density for a while.
But this one was different. Universe 25 was something else.
It was. He wasn't just observing overcrowding. He was asking this fundamental, almost philosophical question.
A question thinkers have been preoccupied with for centuries.
Exactly. What happens when every single environmental problem facing a species is permanently eliminated?
It's such a heavy question. He wasn't just observing, he was, actively designing a laboratory model of heaven.
He was playing God.
He was. He was essentially trying to test Malthusian limits, not by scarcity, which is the usual way, but by perfect abundance.
So the theory was, if the natural struggle for life, the fight for food, for safety, for territory, if that just disappears,
Does life simply continue to flourish, or does some other deeper constraint take over?
and to test that, he built the environment meticulously. Universe 25 was this 9-foot square metal enclosure, a self-contained, glittering technological utopia. The design was absolutely paramount to the whole experiment's premise.
It was everything. Think of it as the ultimate optimized environment for a mouse.
So what does that mean specifically? What did it have?
Well, for one, the temperature was maintained at an absolutely perfect, unchanging 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
Optimized for their health.
Perfectly optimized. The food wasn't just sufficient, it was unlimited. It was readily accessible through 16 different food hoppers.
So they never even had to compete for a spot to eat.
Never. Water flowed endlessly from 14 clean dispensers. And critically, the structure itself, the enclosure, was designed with these vertical stacks of nesting boxes.
Like little mouse apartment buildings.
Exactly like that, connected by 4 vertical mesh ramps. This provided 256 separate habitat units.
Which was way more than they needed, right?
Far more. And it eliminated the need for any complex or dangerous movement. Everything was easy.
And the threat level from the outside world.
Zero. Absolutely zero. No predators, no disease, constant sanitation. There was nothing that required an ounce of caution or, any fight for survival.
So he did the math. Calhoun calculated that this space could physically sustain How many mice?
He figured it could hold 9,600 mice, physically.
9,600, okay.
And with this technological Eden all set up, he introduced the founding population.
The Adam and Eves of Universe 25.
4 pairs.
Yeah.
4 pairs of healthy, genetically diverse mice. And the initial reaction was, just as you'd expect, a profound success.
This is what they called the golden age of the experiment.
It was. The mice very quickly realized that the need to forage, the fear of being eaten, the energy required for defense, it was all completely obsolete.
They had stepped into a permanent welfare state where every biological need was met without any effort at all.
And for a while, for a good period, the results were exactly what classical biological theory would predict.
The population grew.
Exponentially, it doubled every 55 days. This perfect surge of life, this curve, it was initially this powerful testament to the triumph of an ideal, constraint-free environment.
It basically confirmed the biological hypothesis.
Yeah.
Remove the constraints and the population just explodes.
Right.
But this is the transition point, isn't it? This is where the story takes its really dark turn.
This is it.
Because the experiment very quickly shifted from a biological test to something sociological and psychological,
The growth didn't continue indefinitely.
even though the resources were absolutely there to support it.
They were. The system began to fail not when the food ran out, but when the intangible social structures reached a point of catastrophic saturation.
So Calhoun realized the critical resource wasn't the food or the water.
It was space, but not just physical space. It was space to maintain meaningful social relationships.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The mice had solved every single physical problem, only to create a problem of pure psychology.
That turning point, what Calhoun himself defined as the transition from phase B, which he called exploitation, to phase C, the stasis and breakdown phase, it's absolutely crucial for understanding this tragedy.
So when did that happen? At what population?
The population peaked at just over 2,200 individuals. It stabilized there for a very brief period before it started its terminal decline.
No, wait a minute. You just said the physical capacity was close to 10,000?
Almost, yes. 9,600.
They peaked at 2,200. That means the mice stopped reproducing and functioning when over 3/4 of the physical space was still, in theory, completely empty. Why?
That is the core insight of Universe 25. The crisis wasn't about physical density. It was about what Calhoun termed effective social space.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, while the overall enclosure was large, the food hoppers and the water dispensers, they acted like magnets.
Ah, social hubs.
Exactly. Everyone congregated there because effort had been eliminated. There was no reason to go anywhere else. So the mice experienced this extreme local density at these central points.
Even though most of the nesting boxes, the apartments, were empty.
The vast majority of them remained untouched. They were all crowding into the same few areas.
So the problem was that proximity, the need to eat and drink near thousands of others, it meant constant, inescapable social interaction.
Yes. The psychological cost of simply existing near so many of your peers became unbearable.
Even with full bellies.
Even with full bellies. And the result was that the traditional roles that defined a functional mouse society, the dominant territorial male, the diligent nest-building female, they all just collapsed under the weight of this overwhelming social pressure.
Because there was nothing left to fight for against the outside world.
So the internal world fractured.
Without that external struggle, the internal structures fractured violently. And the source material is very, very clear on this. The males, the ones traditionally responsible for maintaining social order and hierarchy, they seem to break first.
They lost the ability to define themselves. Their roles of providing or protecting, abundance had made those roles completely obsolete.
So what did they do instead?
Well, the male population fractured into 2 extremely pathological extremes. The first group were the hyper-aggressive males.
Calhoun had a name for them, didn't he?
He called them the probers.
Like growers.
And these weren't dominant males defending a harem or a territory in any functional way. Their violence was non-functional.
So you mean violence for violence's sake?
Precisely. They formed gangs that would attack others without any provocation. They'd rip up nests, attack females, attack the young.
It was just a relief valve.
It was a release valve for unrelenting psychological stress, not a tool for survival. Their aggression served no territorial or reproductive imperative. It was purely pathological.
And then you had the total opposite extreme, which is, I don't know, it's perhaps even more chilling.
The completely passive males.
The withdrawn.
Yes, the withdrawn. They stopped asserting themselves entirely. They retreated from any conflict. They ignored the fighting. They became totally disengaged from all social duties.
Where would you find them?
They were often found just clustered together, huddled, waiting to eat, failing to protect their families, or even engage in the most basic courtship rituals.
They're just checked out.
Physically present, but utterly absent socially.
But I keep coming back to this. Maternal instinct is supposed to be one of the most powerful biological drives there is. How did this environment manage to override something so fundamental? What was the mechanism of that failure among the females?
Well, the female roles suffered profoundly because they really bore the brunt of this systemic failure.
Oh, so?
First, their mates were either, as we said, too aggressive or completely passive. They offered no support, no stability. And second, the constant harassment from the probers made nest security completely impossible.
So constant stress.
Constant stress. Constant sensory overload from thousands of nearby bodies. And this caused a profound endocrine and neurological disruption, a biological breakdown from social causes.
And the source material says this stress manifested in the loss of critical social programming, specifically nesting behavior.
It did. They just stopped performing the highly complex, learned behavior of building a proper nest, but the outcome was far worse than just, poor housing.
What happened?
Females began to abandon their young. They'd often just leave them scattered outside the boxes. And more disturbingly, under extreme duress, females exhibited infanticide.
They attacked their own babies.
They attacked and killed their own babies.
That is just a shocking level of self-destruction for a species living in what was supposed to be a perfect environment.
And we have the numbers to back it up. In this phase, the infant mortality rate shot up to an absolute staggering 96% in some areas.
96%?
96. The sheer volume of dead and abandoned pups. The floor of that supposed utopia essentially became a massive graveyard.
And it wasn't because they couldn't feed them.
Not at all. It was because the mothers could no longer cope with the environment. Their minds broke.
The psychological density, not the lack of food, became the real predator.
Exactly. And Calhoun's name for this critical phase, the behavioral sink, it's just perfect, isn't it?
It is.
It describes a vortex of pathological togetherness where proximity became entirely unbearable, leading to a complete inversion of natural behavior, even maternal instinct.
They were trapped by the cage, but they were killed by each other.
So as the chaos and the bloodshed of the behavioral sink peaked, a final, truly chilling phenomenon emerged. Amidst all the aggression and the functional failures, a brand new class of mouse appeared.
A new social class.
A group fundamentally defined by their pathological withdrawal from the entire social experiment.
Calhoun dubbed them the beautiful ones.
Yeah.
And that name itself just carries such profound irony.
It really does.
These were exclusively males, right? For the most part.
Mostly males, yes, though similar behaviors were observed in some females. But these were individuals who had completely opted out of any form of engagement with the outside world.
So what do they do all day?
Well, our observations on them are very detailed. They did not participate in the violence. They did not court. They did not attempt to mate. Their entire existence narrowed down to this perfect cycle of pure, low-effort consumption and exhaustive self-care.
They just ate, drank, and slept.
Ate, drank, slept, and most tellingly, they spent their waking hours in meticulous, perpetual grooming.
Their physical characteristics then were perfect.
Perfect. Their coats were sleek, completely unmarred by the stress of social interaction or battle.
No scars.
Not a single scar. They were pristine. And in the context of the messy, diseased chaos of the behavioral sink all around them, they stood out as unnaturally perfect. They looked healthy, but their health was a symptom of their decay.
So their perfection was the physical manifestation of their psychological atrophy.
That's how Calhoun saw it. He theorized that the massive energy that's normally dedicated to courtship, to defense, to the complexities of raising a family, it was all redirected entirely inward.
The biological imperative to struggle and reproduce was replaced by
the narcissistic imperative to maintain a pristine appearance.
So here's the question. If the environment was so perfect, why wouldn't these passive males simply thrive by avoiding all that stress? Why did that withdrawal lead to extinction rather than just a quiet, sustainable existence?
Because their peace came at the cost of functional existence.
Meaning?
They failed to perform any behaviors necessary for the perpetuation of the species, or even just the maintenance of their culture. They were physiologically healthy, but ethologically defunct.
They lost the skills.
They had lost the learned, crucial skills of mating and parenting. They didn't know how to be mice anymore.
So they were healthy, they were comfortable, they were beautiful, but in Calhoun's own words, they were completely dead inside.
Ghosts. Ghosts walking through a city they had refused to claim or defend.
And the truly tragic part of the story is that this withdrawn, beautiful class, they eventually became the majority.
They did. They were the survivors, in a sense, yes, but their survival ensured the end of the line.
When the beautiful ones achieved critical mass, the fate of Universe 25 was sealed.
The ultimate indicator of that societal collapse was the complete cessation of reproduction.
It just stopped.
Completely. Even when the aggressive behavior subsided a little bit during the later stages, it didn't matter. The colony had lost the will to live.
And the source material notes the timeline on that. The last mouse was born in 1970.
Less than 2 years after the experiment started.
That's so fast.
The timeline of social decay was frighteningly swift. It far outpaced the biological lifespan of the individuals themselves.
And all the while, the environment remained a paradise. Resources infinite, climate controlled, but the society had effectively committed demographic suicide.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this was a spiritual and a cultural death that happened long before the physical extinction.
It wasn't a disease.
No, they had failed the challenge of living together in abundance. They had forgotten not only how to be mice, but the very reason for being a mouse.
They became trapped by the very comfort they sought.
Biologically sound, but socially defunct.
So by 1973,
By 1973, Universe 25 reached a population of 0. The paradise, designed for flourishing life, had fully and completely become a tomb.
and Calhoun's conclusion was that the experiment proved that perfection, if it removes struggle and purpose, is a biological and a sociological dead end. When Calhoun published his findings using terms like behavioral sync and directly referencing human parallels, the world, it shuddered.
It did.
And the observations made in that small 9-foot enclosure carry so much weight because they seem to mirror anxieties we have about our own rapidly expanding, technologically advanced, and densely populated human civilization.
And I think the reason this research maintains its power, its hold on us, is that the relative abundance Calhoun was simulating back in 1968. Well, that's now the baseline reality for large sections of the globe.
We've solved the problems of mass starvation and exposure in ways no previous civilization could have even imagined.
We live in a world of profound abundance.
We do. Infinite data and entertainment streamed instantly to our pockets. Food delivered from any cuisine imaginable. Automated systems that remove friction from nearly every daily task. We are relentlessly engineering struggle and discomfort out of our existence.
Creating what looks, on the surface like a vast, frictionless utopia.
But just like the mice who peaked at a few hundred, despite having room for almost 10,000, we're seeing the inverse of what this perfect abundance should promise.
We are. We have surging rates of social isolation, particularly in the most densely populated, most prosperous urban centers.
And the psychological stress, the rates of anxiety and depression, they're skyrocketing.
Even as the real existential threats of daily life decrease.
Which raises a really critical question. Is the psychological toll of hyperconnectivity, of this constant, inescapable social comparison we have now, digital proximity, is it creating a human behavioral sink?
Are we drowning in the presence of others, amplified by social media noise, despite being physically safer than ever from natural dangers?
Calhoun's work directly implies that the modern urban environment, specifically the high-density apartment blocks of the mid to late 20th century, functions in a similar way to Universe 25.
People are physically close, but socially fragmented.
The need to carve out meaningful defensive social territory is replaced by this enforced, overwhelming proximity.
And we become desensitized to our neighbors. We experience them only as stressors, not as members of a community.
And crucially, this means we need to look for our own beautiful ones. The source material points to the rise of specific demographic groups that seem to be actively checking out of traditional societal roles.
The parallels are, they're uncomfortable to look at.
Very.
Think of the societal trend of young adults retreating into solitary apartments, avoiding the messy, chaotic, emotionally demanding interpersonal world. They're highly functional in consumption, they're eating, streaming, working remote jobs, but they actively reject the traditional social markers of maturity.
Like finding a mate, starting a family.
Engaging in local community politics, or fighting for complex social outcomes. It's all too much effort.
And this withdrawal manifests in ways that are eerily similar to the beautiful one's grooming pathology.
It does.
Instead of manic physical grooming, we see this hyper-focus on self-optimization. the obsession with pristine fitness, or the exhaustive curation of a digital persona.
Grooming digital avatars.
Exactly, grooming digital avatars while avoiding the effort of physical social engagement entirely.
They're healthy, they're comfortable, often aesthetically perfect, but they are fundamentally disconnected. They're exhibiting what Calhoun called a loss of social capital.
The skills required for dynamic functional interaction.
They've substituted purpose for optimization.
And we also see echoes of the probers, the hyper-aggressive gangs. I mean, look at the rise of seemingly random, non-survival-based aggression. Violence in public spaces, online harassment campaigns, political polarization that's pushed to these destructive extremes.
It often lacks a clear motive tied to material gain or territory, doesn't it?
It does. It feels like violence or antagonism as a desperate outlet for a systemic, overwhelming psychological stress. A stress born from a lack of meaningful struggle.
And the breakdown of community is palpable. We are technically more connected than ever through our technology, yet we experience this profound clinical loneliness.
The reproductive collapse in Universe 25 finds a stark and really worrying parallel in declining global birth rates.
Especially in industrialized nations that offer the absolute highest level of material security.
The very choice to check out, to refuse to perpetuate the species when life loses its purpose, seems to be accelerating, even in times of maximal security.
Calhoun's mice showed that when the cost of raising children, and I mean in terms of social stress and complexity, not necessarily material cost, when that becomes too high, the biological imperative can be overridden by sociological decay.
So Calhoun's core warning, the synthesis of the entire experiment, it remains just as powerful today.
Survival is not just biological. A species needs more than food and safety.
It needs functional purpose.
It needs necessary struggle.
And it needs social space to form meaningful, hierarchical, reciprocal relationships.
So what does this all mean for us? When we dedicate our society to removing all challenges, to making life utterly frictionless,
We create a vacuum where the soul just withers.
the comfort that we relentlessly seek becomes the ultimate killer.
And as we continue to build our smart cities and optimize our lives, reducing all that friction, we are forced to ask ourselves, are we building a true paradise?
Or are we merely designing a very, very comfortable box?
We have to recognize that the irony is terrifying.
It is.
The very thing that historically kept humanity functional, the necessity of being a struggling, interdependent part of a community, is the thing we are happily discarding for an easier comfort.
And that comfort, as the experiment suggests, leads directly to extinction.
So, to bring this deep dive into Universe 25 to a close, let's just reflect on the sheer tragedy of it. The mice died, surrounded by everything they ever wanted. They were victims of their own engineered success. They didn't fail against nature. They failed against the complexities of their own social existence.
And the final haunting image is the one that really stays with you.
Which one is that?
It's the image of the last mouse, all alone in its pristine environment. Its perfect fur, unruffled, completely unscarred.
Surrounded by enough food to last many lifetimes.
Exactly. It was physiologically perfect, but socially extinct.
It's a final, urgent reminder that the true opposite of life isn't necessarily death by starvation or violence.
No.
The opposite of life is a perfect, painless, repurposeless existence. It's the cessation of meaning and the atrophy of function.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought, something for you to consider as you navigate your own abundant world where friction is so rapidly disappearing.
Which is,
What small, voluntary struggle or purpose could you actively introduce back into your own life? What purposeful friction? What non-essential but challenging commitment? A relationship, a difficult skill, a physical goal? What can you seek out to ensure you are not retreating into your own version of the beautiful ones?
living in a human Universe 25.
Because the line between paradise and prison, it seems, is only defined by the effort required to stay socially and psychologically free.